Way. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am, of course, your host, Matt Gardner. Today, I have Chris Shatek in the house. Chris, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing fantastic, brother. Thank you. How you doing?
Very good, very good. I have been excited for this interview. You do have a background in radio. I can tell by that voice.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. Thank you very much.
Amazing velveteen tones, and yeah, I've been very excited about this. Just a quick backstory. Like, we've known each other all of a matter of weeks, but I'll tell you, we were introduced through, I don't even want to say a mutual friend, a great lady, but I met her through a business networking group, and she said, "Oh, you got to reach out to my friend Chris," and she introduced us. And man, I gotta say, like, quite a cool collaboration we have going on. You're a sober coach as well, and I was lucky enough to be brought on to do a workshop in your group there, and here we are. And now you're on my podcast. So I just gotta say, like, for a couple weeks in, really appreciating the collaboration so far. And dude, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, you know how when you just meet somebody and you kind of just gel and it's just easy? Yeah, it's one of those
Yeah.
situations where I love relationships like that, And so yeah, man, it's cool because we share a lot of similarities and our philosophies around alcohol and how to kind of overcome it. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here and I appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast, brother.
Yeah, dude. Yes. So let's get into it. I always like to start the show with, what are you doing right now? Like, let the people know, like, I know you got a wonderful TikTok channel going on. You have a community, so freedom from alcohol. Yeah, just let's get into a little bit about what you have, all the plates you have spinning in the air right now.
Yeah, yeah. So, I run a coaching business and it's Chris Shatek coaching, but the program that we have people run through is called the 180 mission program because, it's more than just not drinking. It's really taking our lives and doing a 180 with it, not just in, okay, we want to quit drinking, but where else do we want to, do a 180 in our life? And so I got that going on. We have a wonderful group of people within the coaching community. It's me and another coach, Lauren, right now, who's been great. And so we're in there. We do group calls, we do one-on-one calls. I do have a Facebook group that anybody can join. You just mentioned, it's called Freedom from Alcohol. And yeah, I'm, mainly, if you want content, I would say to go to my TikTok page. That is where I do a lot of content, and this is coming from a guy who never thought in a million years I would be on TikTok, but here we are. Because
Yeah.
when I started doing it a little over a year ago, I'm like, I don't want to lip sync, I don't want to have to like dance and do all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, all right, I'll just go on, I'll just start saying my message, and if people like it, that's fine. I had no idea. I did a video talking about, you know, how I tried to moderate my drinking and it just didn't work. And it just all of a sudden blew up. And I'm like, oh, this TikTok thing there's something to it. And
Mhm.
it's been amazing. The people that it's brought to me and I've got to connect with and work with and help get alcohol out of their lives in the past year plus has been really, really incredible.
Oh man, it's such a great story. And yeah, you were still like, some of those, like you said, some of those TikTok videos just boom, the proverbial went viral, as the kids say. Yeah, so good on you for that. And I love that, man, just showing up vulnerable. Definitely follow anybody that's hearing this, that has the ability to use the TikTok app. Definitely give Chris a follow. There's some great stuff on there. And things I think often they get overlooked. Like for me, I'm coming up on 4 years sober, and there's certain things perhaps I take for granted, and then just remembering how I was 4 years ago, and a lot of those things that you're very on point with bringing up, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's a good point. The further you get from that drinking version of you, you kind of forget a lot of stuff of just how bad I was and where I was at, because I just don't even recognize that version of me anymore. And
Yeah.
I have to kind of remind myself of like, oh yeah, I really felt like shit on a daily basis. That's the good news, is that the further you get away, the more you forget about that. But that can also be a detrimental thing because, and I always forget the name of this term, but we tend to remember just the good times that we had with
Mm.
drinking,
Hmm.
and it's something that our brain does, and we'll kind of forget about the bad stuff. which can be bad, right? Because we go, oh, drinking wasn't that bad. We
Yeah.
had all these good times, but it is important to kind of remember the hell that alcohol puts us through.
Yeah. It reminds me of, the classic X thing. It's like after haven't been with this, your partner for a while and you're like, oh man, but we loved camping so much. We had those great times, didn't we? And then you perhaps try it on another date, a couple of years later, and within like a few minutes, sometimes you're just like, oh wait, okay, no, now I remember. I imagine it'd be very much like that with drinking, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, well, let's get into that. Let's pause that for now. I want to come back into a little more of a deeper dive in everything that you have going on and how people can find you towards the end. But before we do, Chris, I'd love to give you just an open forum. I want to hear your story. So, roll back the clocks as far as you care to go. As far as your introductory into drinking culture. Was it part of your family? Whatever you want to disclose, I want to give you the open forum, and don't mind me. I'll be scribbling down some notes for different things that jump off the page to me that I'd like to circle back to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess we could go back to when I was a kid. My mom owned a bar and we lived right above it. So
That's okay. That's it.
the funny thing is too that my mom never was a drinker really. But then my dad was a drinker. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and my mom decided that she was going to open up a bar in a small town, and I went to live with her. And yeah, we lived above it. I used to DJ in the bar on the weekends, so I was in the bar all the time. I knew the regulars. I was always around drinking, but I didn't really like drinking when I was a teenager. I'd go to parties and I may have had a drink, but I never really fell in love with it. I was just kind of doing it because other people were. I didn't like the way that it made me feel. It changed me, and I was like, I don't like this. And I even a couple of times, my buddies convinced me to steal a couple of cases of beer from my mom's bar. Which, sorry, mom, she's no longer
Ooh.
with us, but I hope she forgives me for that. So anyway, I would drink a little bit, but really not a lot. And then, my parents both actually passed away when I was 19. So
Mm.
that was a rough, obviously, time for me to go through. And before I became a big drinker, I became a big gambler. So
Mm.
I was addicted to gambling after my parents died. I was at the casino a lot. I basically pissed away most of their inheritance, which wasn't a lot, but it was a good chunk of money that if I would have invested that money, I would be in a lot better position than I was today. But it was like I was trying to fill that void, right? And I look back now
Mm.
and I go, ever
Mhm.
since that happened, I was always trying to fill that void with something. And so I kind of got over the gambling thing for the most part, and then I turned to drinking because I was just a social drinker. I would go out and have a few drinks here and there. It was no big deal. I never had alcohol in my house until one night. I remember buying a case of beer, and I'm like, I'm just gonna have this at my house. Um, and I drank the entire case that night. And I remember that significantly because it was
Yeah.
the first time that I realized, oh, I can just get drunk at home and I don't have to talk to anybody. And I
Mm.
kind of like that feeling, even though I felt like crap the next day. I'm like, oh, I remember looking back on that's when things kind of shifted. Now, I still wasn't this big time drinker until a few years later in my mid 20s. I had gotten laid off from my dream job. I had
Mm.
always wanted to work on the radio. And so I worked my way up. I was in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, on a really great morning show. Like mornings is where you want to be, great high profile. And I loved it. I was having so much fun. I thought I was on top of the world, and boom, got laid off
Mm.
because the radio industry has been in a downward spiral for a long time. And so they've been laying off people. And, I took it very personal. I thought my life was over. I
Mhm.
had worked very hard to get to that place. And I was like, now what am I going to do? I had wrapped my identity so much into being a radio personality that I was like, well, I can't do anything else. And so I got into this
Mm.
spiral of drinking at home every night,
Mhm.
passing out, going almost through, an 18 pack of beers every night. And sometimes if that didn't do the trick, I'd have to make sure I had vodka to knock me out. I got to this point where I was like, I had convinced myself I cannot sleep unless I get drunk enough to pass out.
Mm.
And it just kind of continued that way for a while. I kind of got back into radio in some smaller markets. And then I got out of that and sold cars for a while. Really had this identity crisis. Like, oh my God, I used to be this big time radio guy. And now I'm a sleazeball salesman that people don't even want to talk to. And I was lonely. I had gone through some
Yeah.
breakups. That loneliness was a biatch, man. It was,
Yeah.
I remember being in my little 1-bedroom apartment there for a while. And I always had like 3 or 4 empty cases of beer bottles that I just would drink, put them in
Mhm.
there, fill them up.
Mhm.
I would go to different liquor stores every day because I didn't want the same people to recognize me. I would do all these things. Um, and I don't know, I just was really falling in love with drinking. Like that was the only thing I started to look forward to. I thought I needed it so much. Even when I met my wife and we had a great relationship, we both drank though. We met while we were
Mm.
drinking.
Mhm.
We would sit on the couch and drink together. We would go out and drink together. That's what we did. And so I didn't stop. I had my daughter and I still would drink
Mm. Mhm.
almost every night. If I had to go a day without having any alcohol, I would get very anxious, very
Ah.
worried, like, oh my
Mhm.
God, what am I going to do? And I knew that it was kind of a problem. And I would say right around the time that my daughter was born, I really started going, okay, maybe I need to look at this. And I would take 30-day breaks. I'd feel really good, but I would be waiting until day 31 when I could go back to drinking. It was like, okay, I've done really well. Now it's time to reward myself, even though I was feeling great in those 30 days. And I just kept finding myself coming back to it. I read some books, would get really motivated, but that would fall off. And I just was not liking who I was. I was passing out on my couch every night. Nobody really knew except my wife, and she probably honestly didn't even know exactly how much I was drinking and how much it was making me miserable on the inside. And so what happened was, after drinking heavily for about 15 years, I got laid off again from the radio industry.
Mm.
And I should preface too, a big part of why I realized now that I was drinking was because I was not fulfilled in my job.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
I was so uh, disconnected with what I was doing. I wasn't making a difference. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was just doing the job because I knew how to do it. I was just getting by. I was in the comfort zone and I was
Mm.
terrified to do anything else because I didn't know what that looked like. I was living in fear, man.
Mhm.
And you know, when I felt disconnected on a daily basis, I know that that's why I wanted to drink more because I was like, well, screw it. Let's just drink. I got nothing to look forward to. I have to everybody else, it was a great job. Oh man, you're on the radio. Oh, you get to meet all these famous people. You get to go to concerts, which
Mm.
by the way, there's free booze flowing backstage and all those things. Oh, by the way, I worked in the country music genre. I don't know if you've ever heard a country song, but they all pretty much revolve around drinking.
Yeah.
And the lifestyle is drinking, going to concerts, blue collar, you know, got to struggle through life just to get through the weekend so I can get shit faced. Like this
Mhm.
is all these things I didn't even realize at the time was playing into why I was a drinker, a lot of it. And so, I got laid off in 2020 and I was like, okay, this is it. I got to do something else. Well, Apple offered me a job on the same day that I got laid off.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
like, I don't want to say no to Apple. That'd be kind of dumb. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Apple. Even though it was a job that I wasn't crazy about, it was in the radio industry. I could work from home. Literally,
Mm.
I had to work about 4 hours a week, making good money from Apple,
Hmm.
but I was miserable.
Mm.
The more time, the more free time I had, I call it FOT, fuck off time. Um, that was dangerous to me because it was like,
Sure.
all right, well, nobody's holding me accountable. I'm home all day long. I don't have to get up at a certain time. I'll just drink more and more, earlier and earlier, and it got bad, man. It got really bad. I remember this is my life, and I don't recognize this guy anymore, but I would watch this YouTube channel of a guy playing slot machines and get drunk on my couch for hours at a time. And I would do that almost every day. I was
Mm.
watching somebody else play slot machines while I was getting drunk. What the hell was I doing with my life? That is so like I
Yeah,
want to
that's
shake that version of me because it's like
right.
that's looking back now that I was crying out for help because
Mm.
I was not who that's not me. And I
Right,
think I
right.
got so disgusted with myself and I said, this is not me. I'm not going to keep going down this path. I just can't. And so I got let go from Apple. Had nothing to do with drinking. It was something completely different. And
Mm,
I always say that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me, Apple firing
mm,
me.
yeah.
Um, because it forced me to pivot. It forced me to do something different with my life. And it was when that happened that I got real honest with myself. I had this accountability conversation and I just said, Chris, if we're going to have the life we know we're meant for, if we're going to be that person we know we can be, alcohol cannot be a part of our life anymore. We just, that's the one thing that's been holding us back. And it was like something clicked in my head. And then you know, later that day, or I don't remember when exactly the day was, but what was Father's Day that I drank last, I had a stupid argument with my wife. She was drinking too. And I remember going up to bed that night, laying in bed and closing my eyes, and a flash of light, I saw it in my head. And I was like,
Mm,
that's it. That's the universe being very
mm,
direct with me here, saying, you're done drinking from this
mm.
moment on. And I haven't looked back, and it's been amazing. I've done more and felt better in the last almost 2 years without alcohol than I've done in the previous 20 years in my life. It's really, really incredible the difference from where I used to be to where I am now. And by the way, my wife no longer drinks either. She because that was a concern, It was like, okay, well, our whole relationship is built around drinking. What's going to happen if I'm a non-drinker and she still drinks? So I was a little bit nervous about that. And she noticed the benefits that I was experiencing and the changes I was experiencing. And about 2 months after I quit, she also quit and hasn't looked back either.
Beautiful.
And if you would have
Beautiful.
asked us 5 years ago if both of us would be sober completely, we would have
Yeah,
said you're crazy. There's no
sure.
way. But man, I got to tell you, it's a lot better, where we're at now than where we used to be.
Yeah. What a story, man. And and that's why I love talking with people, recovery people, sobriety people is like, you can always hear elements of your own story in theirs. And then of course it's nuanced depending on different like life circumstances and such. But man, there's a lot of familiarity between, my story and yours. Right down to like, my wife and I as well, very much the party couple. We've been together 16 and a half years now. And I'd say the first 5, 6 years, like that was us. And we, you mentioned the word identity, which I definitely want to come back to. And it was very interesting too. That was going to be my question for you with your relationship with your wife. So I'm glad you brought it up at the end there. For us, definitely a delayed reaction on her side of it. Not really bad, but it was probably a good 10 months or so that she intermittently continued to drink after I had sobered up. And yeah, dude, that created some drama, honestly, to be honest with you. So very happy to hear that was like, a couple months in that she decided to. And it's just, isn't that incredible that you can look back at, you guys met over, like you say, sitting on the couch drinking beers. It totally brought up some memories for me too,
Yeah. We
very
met
cool.
while we were drunk. We were at a casino, at a country concert that our radio station was hosting, and that's where we met. And
Right.
yeah, the whole thing was revolved around that, like so many
Yeah.
people's lives are.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
normal. There's a lot of people it's what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So
100%. And yeah, that's like the how we met story, right? Which is so, like you say, it's so different from where you guys are now, which is amazing. Yeah, dude. I want to go back. There's a couple things I scribbled down. So yeah, parents passing away early to me, and it sounds like you've identified that as, the linchpin potentially for like there's this void had been inside of you, perhaps still to a degree is. I don't know how deep you want to get into that, but that stood out to me for sure. Like really sorry to hear that. That's a tough age. I mean, it's tough on any age, but 19, it's still, you're just getting into that, transitioning into that adulthood, right? And so I could see where that would have really affected you.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean that void you talk about, I don't think that ever goes away. I mean,
sure.
losing your parents, um, yeah, I mean that I wouldn't wish that on anybody, especially, I mean, they died 41 days apart. My mom had Lou Gehrig's disease, which is also known as ALS, and then my dad had colon cancer.
Man.
And it was a transitional period in my life. I was going to college. I was just starting to boom in my radio career. So there was a lot of guilt that I wasn't
Yeah.
with them as much as I wanted to be.
Right.
But the difference now, and I say it doesn't ever go away, it does get better. And it gets better by not running from it and
Mhm.
understanding that it's okay to feel bad when something like that happens. It's I used it for a long time as kind of a crutch, I guess, to like, well, it's okay for me to feel bad about my life because this happened to me. And that
Sure.
was the story that I ended up telling myself. And well, I have an addictive personality because my life was so tragic and this is so tragic and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
When I was using that story, and I wasn't even doing it intentionally, but I realized now I was doing it and kind of like leaning on that as like, well, woe is me. And when I flipped that to go, you know what, how can I use this to better my circumstances and to help other people that may be struggling with something like that, and looking at it as a gift in a way, because I had to grow up real fast, man. I got a small
Mm,
family. I didn't have that safety net. I didn't have mom and dad to go back to. And so I had to grow up real fast and learn a
mm,
lot at a young age on my own. And so I look at that, I go, if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be the man that I am today because
mhm.
of those things. And so we can kind of take any situation, whether it's good or bad, or it's in the moment we think it's good or bad, but we can look at it as a gift somehow. Even if we can't look at it like that today, I think it's super powerful to look at the events in our life and go, okay, how can I look at this as a gift? What can I learn from it? And that's been super helpful in me in changing my story.
Hell yeah. No, that's powerful. That's powerful. Thanks for getting into that. Yeah, and what else do we have on here? Yeah, you know what? And another thing that I relate, I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate to that is that, that threshold. You think after you're going to reset completely, or your wishful thinking, wishful drinking thinking, right? Is like after 30 days, I'll be able to go back. I'll be able to moderate. It's all good. And then to your point, it's like, yeah, all these things start opening for you, whether it's just health wise, you're feeling better, you're feeling overall happier, you're probably enjoying mornings a lot more. And yet, in the back of your mind is like, okay, or the front of your mind is like, okay, by day 31, here we go. It's like, let's try again. It's just, it's madness, right? So
Yeah.
that one, I definitely related to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we look at alcohol as a reward like that, which many of us do, that was what was happening, right? I was like, "Ooh, I did my 30 days or my 31 days. I get to reward myself." Now I think about it, I'm like, that's absolutely not a reward. And the other part of it is what was different between those times and the time when I said I'm done is I went all in. Uh, I
Mm,
I didn't kind of sort of hope to quit drinking. I went in with the plan knowing like from this day forward, I'm a non-drinker. And I think this is huge to change our identities to that of a non-drinker.
yeah.
There's a difference between that and somebody who's trying to stay sober, somebody who's fighting to stay sober. Like if we can change our mindset to go, you know what, I'm a non-drinker. What would a non-drinker do in this situation?
Mm,
Um, and something happens when we kind of approach it that way, as opposed to, well, let's just see. And that's why I
yeah.
don't, the other times that I would try to quit, I would track my sober days on a sober app.
Mhm.
And I didn't do it this time because I always found that kind of pulling me back to it. I didn't want to like have to
Yeah.
check every day and be like, how many days has it been? I just wanted to move on from it. And
Mm,
I think sometimes the sober apps, and I don't want to deter anybody from using them because they work great for some people, but for me personally, that didn't work. I needed to just go, it's like if I was going to break up with a person, I wouldn't want to check, okay, it's been 7 days since I've been with this person. I don't
yeah.
want that to be hovering around me. I want to break away from this thing, and
Yeah.
look forward.
Yeah. That's a distinction for sure. Right. And, the power of words and the power of what you're putting into your brain, right? I'm picturing it's like, yeah, you're trying to break up with somebody, yet you have a bunch of pictures still in your cell phone. You're still
Yeah.
exposing yourself to it and such. So yeah, very good distinction there. I love that. I like the fuck off time too, man. And like the alone drinking was like a big reward or comfort for me as well. And yeah, dude, that's like I would intentionally keep myself busy to avoid that. But I'll tell you the times where I was like, I'm ahead of the game, I'm ahead of everything. I'd be like, it'd be noon, it'd be 10 in the morning, and I'd be like, fuck, I'm on top of everything. I'm gonna go get a six pack or like fuck the six pack case of beer or whatever and start drinking right at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
After I'd crossed that line just that one time whenever I was 24 or something, that line was no longer there. You know what I mean? So I
Yep.
was hearing that for sure as well. That drinking alone thing. Oof.
Yeah. And that line gets, smaller and smaller. And I think, the pandemic really proved that to a lot of people. It really brought to the forefront, their relationship with alcohol. It did for me. It did for many people that I know, because we were working from home, a lot of us, and
Hmm.
you'd start drinking a little bit earlier and earlier and earlier, and um, the lack of engagement and too much fuck off time will definitely be not a good recipe if you want to quit drinking. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're early on in sobriety, I always tell
Oof.
people, like, bury yourself into projects. I don't even care if they're fun or exciting. Do the mundane shit, clean out the linen closet, clean out the garage, write thank
Yeah.
you letters to somebody, whatever it is, stuff that
Yeah.
you've been putting off, just do it.
Yeah.
Because if your brain is busy, you don't have that little voice piping up going, hey, drink, drink.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And like that's I know if you go to like, AA or some other suggestions is like don't just simply replace one habit with another. And I know long term that's not necessarily something to be done, because then you're still going to be bypassing some of these other things that we'll get into as well. Like you're talking about the, your identification of, or your awareness that you've been living in fear, that you're unfulfilled. Perhaps you would have just bypassed that entirely if you just found, like, started going to the gym every day, for example, which is something that I did.
Mhm.
Having said that, though, like what you just mentioned, just to piggyback on what you just said, absolutely, there's going to be a lot of energy. Let's face it, me as a drinker, I spent a lot of energy like getting over on people, telling people I was busy when in fact I was just drinking. I planned when I was going to talk to my mom, so I'd only be like half cut instead of all the way. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's so much energy. And like you said, going to different liquor stores so they don't think that you're drinking every day. For sure, dude, there's a lot of energy. So that energy I put into going to the gym right away and just keeping myself busy. So 100%, what great advice that is. And then from there, okay, then we can start exploring. Okay, why were you drinking in the first place, right? Which,
Yeah.
that would be my next question for you. Like when you got back into radio that second time and you said you were, feeling unfulfilled and such, was there like a little bit of carryover from the previous time that you had been laid off? Like, were you still a little bit jaded from that experience, or was it something else altogether?
No, I would say it's just the fact that I just didn't like the career anymore.
Oh, okay.
The reason I wanted to be on radio, it was because these people got to be so creative and do these little fun bits. And people didn't have to see you, because I'm not great with being on stage or having people see me because I can see their reactions. If I'm in a studio, man, I can just be me and being goofy and use all my creativity. Well, the problem was radio has changed so much from when I first started in it that they didn't want you to be creative anymore. They wanted you to shut up and
Mm,
play the music
okay.
and be like, okay, that was this song. Here's this song. Well, that's a work that a monkey can do. So
Sure.
it wasn't making me use my creativity. When I would get creative with stuff, my boss would be like, nope, that's stupid. Don't do it. And it's just like, okay.
Okay.
So that was part of it. But also, the bigger thing was I knew I wanted to be doing something where I could see a tangible result in people that I was helping, that I was doing something that it would make me feel fulfilled. And that's why I love coaching, because I love
Mm,
watching people go from where they were to where they are. And even if they don't believe they can do it, and I know that they can, and I
mm,
get to watch them go from this to that shit lights me up. And that's how I know now that I'll work 60, 70, 80 hours a week doing this, and it doesn't ever feel like work, where I would
yeah.
just barely do enough work to surpass it in the radio thing. And I was like, ugh, it was a sludge to get through it. But you know, the best moments that I loved in radio were not getting to go to the concerts, not when we got really great ratings and all the kind of perks that come with the job. It was when we would raise money, like we raised over $1 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital,
Wow.
doing a radiothon. And then we did it for when I worked down in Miami for a radio thon down there for Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and got to be in front of these families who were impacted by it. And those were the kind of moments where I'm like,
Mm,
these are the days I feel great, when I'm doing something of substance that gives
yeah.
back, that you can see people's lives. And so there was just this big disconnect of me in this room in a studio talking about stupid shit that I didn't care about, like the Kardashians and all this kind of stuff. Like, I don't care
Yeah.
about that stuff,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
talk about it. I can't talk
Right.
about stuff that I really want to. So I think that's
Yeah.
where that came in.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad we dove into that. So, and I want to get into the the origin story of your coaching practice and such. I'm looking forward to that. I'm definitely seeing like how we're walking into that, and what you're identifying as resonating with you, like substance, service, and so forth, and how you're going to combine that. But before you do, I have one last question about your, so I guess your origin story, we'll call it. You said something about like there was a night where you either saw or felt like a presence or a light or whatever it was. How do you, yeah, I guess, how do you identify with that now? And what did that like sort of physically do to you? Because I'm imagining that was like your moment, like you mentioned, the universe tapped you on the shoulder or maybe smack in the back of the head, whatever it was. I just want to talk a little bit about that because that really jumped out to me.
Yeah, it did to me too. It was like ringing my bell. It was so obvious that it was the universe giving me a sign like, look, dummy, you got to change. You got to quit banging your head against the wall and wondering why it hurts. Like, duh, you can't keep going down this path
Mhm.
and expect to be happy,
Right.
and up until that point, I have never been a religious person. I've never really been very spiritual, because I didn't really grow up around that. I didn't really understand it. But since that moment and since quitting drinking and discovering who I am and growing as a person, man, I've really gotten into the spirituality thing because there's so many signs that have happened. So once I started paying attention, that I go, oh, I see. I need to listen to these things more. I need to listen to my
Mm,
intuition more.
yeah.
And so I look back at that moment now, and that was me, my soul, my core, whatever, going, here's your sign. Pay attention.
Mm,
And so ever since then, I've really been hyper focused because there's been so many times on this journey of starting this coaching business, which I had no business doing. I felt selfish at times because I didn't have a job, and I'm like, I'm gonna start this brand new business. I have a wife and a daughter. Like, am I being selfish doing this? Should I just go get a
mm,
job? There's so
mhm.
much risk involved.
Yeah.
But every time I would start to question that, something would happen. I'd get another sign. And I would, like a tax refund came in that I completely forgot about on the day that I was going to have to go dip into our emergency fund. And it was just the right amount to be able to pay rent that
Wow.
day. Like those little moments. I remember shooting a
Yeah.
video crying because I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm listening now, universe. You have my attention. And
Mm,
since I started doing that, paying attention and listening more, stuff has fallen into place. And I can't even describe it. You know, it's just so incredible, those little moments that when you start paying attention. And by the way, when we're drinking all the time, we can't pay attention to those.
sure. Sure.
Our vibrational level is down.
Yeah.
Those things go whoop, we don't nothing matters except
Yeah.
drinking and getting our next drink.
Yeah.
All these kind of little moments in life that I get to enjoy now and I'm aware of. Shit,
Mm.
that doesn't happen while we're drinking.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's just you're so into this. The funny thing is I had this realization a couple of weeks ago. I thought I was using drinking to get present. If it would, and then, you
Hmm.
know, like that was like because I was always like wanting to get to that moment where I'd have that first drink, right? And then the first drink after about that first whatever, I call it 15 seconds, I'm like numbing out the presence. Like you're saying, like I would have there was probably so many of those types of like synchronistic type things that were happening. And I was just like, so just gonzo. Right. Yeah. Interesting. I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we believe alcohol is giving us, courage,
Yeah.
confidence,
Right.
helping with anxiety, it's actually doing the opposite of all
Yeah.
that. Like helping
Yeah.
us sleep. No, it's making your sleep suck.
So
It's
yeah.
making you more anxious. It's
Yeah.
not helping you give real confidence. It's just dumbing us down so we don't care as much.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, the confidence and the courage that comes when you are a non-drinker, man, it's night and day difference.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if somebody's listening to this going, oh, I need to drink because of this, you really don't. It's actually doing the opposite in most cases.
100%. Yeah, it's an illusion for sure. And you know what? I'm actually curious. Just a quick little side note on this. What you think of this? I'm picking up on this vibe that alcohol is getting marginalized in the same way that cigarettes have been in the last like 10, 15 years, you know what I mean?
Mhm,
Where it was always
mhm.
like cigarettes were like the best friend for everything. They were in every movie, you know, Fight Club the entire time they're smoking, right? You know, and it's getting to that stage now where alcohol is kind of like getting marginalized. Like it's not actually doing all that stuff, you know, all those things for you. And people are like, you know what I mean? Like they have that sober New Year's this past year on you know one of the US channels there. Just even the ever growing market of like alcohol free beers, and there's like craft beer now. I don't know, dude. Are you getting that impression as well? Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
getting, yeah, it's really
Yeah, the
cool, right?
non-alcoholic beverage space, grew by 33% in
Right?
2021. I don't know what it did in 2022, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's exploding, and especially the younger generation, I think,
Yes.
is really kinda going, "Do I really wanna do this and be
Right.
hungover and feel like shit?" Like,
Yeah.
there's gotta be better ways for me to relax or, to whatever, and yeah, I think it is a movement, and it is, we'll look back on alcohol in 20, 30 years,
Hmm.
like we do cigarettes now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the unrestricted marketing that alcohol has. They can say whatever they want, they can claim whatever they want, but it is starting to lose its cool, which is awesome. And that's why
Yeah.
I love, like, people like you and me are doing this movement, because more people talking about it makes it okay.
Yep.
Because with
Yeah.
alcohol, it's the only drug we have to justify why we're not taking it. How
Right.
bullshit
Yeah.
backwards is that?
Yeah.
And the more people that say, "You know what? Yeah, alcohol is just really not cool anymore," it gets those people that are suffering in silence, like I used to
Yeah.
go, "Well, yeah, maybe I do want to take a look at this."
Yeah, for sure. You know, you know, speaking of, you know, sitting in silence and such, yeah, let's get into the work you're doing now. Cause you know, I can imagine just from like the way that you set the table as far as, okay, I'm not feeling fulfilled, you know, and then all signs pointing towards, you know, doing something else and doing this pivot. When was it that you were just like, okay, I'm going to combine my life experience. I love, you know, helping people that can show up as coaching. Like, how did that come to be? Like, did you have to try on a few hats, or was it just like, no, coaching is for me. I'm going to get these certifications. Like how, you know, was it point A to point B, or was there a few, you know, curveballs along the way,
Yeah.
as far as that went?
It's kind of funny when I look back, I'm like, I don't even know how I got here. It was literally taking one step, taking the next step, taking action, not overthinking, like I have
Yeah.
done my whole life.
Yeah.
When I got let go from Apple, I knew I needed to do something different. I knew I wanted to help people, and I had seen coaches. I'd seen life coaches, and I'm like, "Oh, that might
Mm.
be kind of cool. Like I could help people." And I did not intend on helping people around alcohol at that time. I just wanted to. I knew I wanted to be a coach of some sort, but I wasn't sure what. And so I got a certification to become a life coach,
Mhm.
and at the same time I hired a husband and wife couple. They're life coaches. Their niche is with around relationships, but they also help people build the foundation for a coaching business. People who have no idea what the hell they're doing.
Oh, okay.
And so I randomly found these people online. Ironically enough, it was the anniversary of my mom's passing, June
Hmm.
23rd. And I put a post in a group that I was in Facebook asking for help. I said, I think I want to be a life coach, but I don't really know where to start. These people reached out, and I signed up with them. I invested a good amount of money, and it was the first time I'd ever spent that kind of money on investing in
Mm.
myself, even though I didn't
Mhm.
have a job. I had to
Mhm.
take it
Mhm.
from savings. um, but I was like, when I invested that money into myself, everything changed. Because
Mm.
first of all, I'm not going to spend that kind of money and then fail at it. That wasn't going to work for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I was committed. And so, second of all, I was like, I love the fact that I'm spending this money on myself
Mm.
instead of giving it to alcohol companies, instead of pissing it
Yeah.
away on something stupid.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I worked with them, and they said, okay, you got to figure out who you're going to help. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. I just recently quit drinking, and I really would love to help people be able to do that because it took so much of my life from me. But I'm like, I
Mhm.
can't help people with that. I just did it myself. And they were like, well, as long as you're 30% further along than a person that's still drinking, you can help them. And so that kind of helped me go, okay, get
Mhm.
over that fear of like, I can't help people with this. And so I just started going, all right, I'm going to work in this space.
Mhm.
And it just really evolved over time of who exactly am I going to help? how am I going to help them? And I built out this coaching business, and it's just really been amazing to see the results of the clients that I've worked with that put their trust in me to help them overcome this. And then they put in the work. I held them accountable. They held themselves accountable. And man, I got to tell you, the people that I've seen change their life, there's not a better feeling in the world. And I remember those people that I just talked about that I hired telling me in the beginning, like, you're going to feel selfish. You're going to feel like
Mm-hmm.
you get to make money by doing this. And I do. I'm like, holy shit. Like, it's the greatest thing in the world
Yeah.
to be able to connect with people, be able to walk alongside them on this journey, never shaming, not judging, but to be there. And sometimes, what if people just need somebody that believes in them,
Mm.
that can guide them along? And it's not so much about not drinking, but it's about what do we need to do with our lives so that
Yeah.
alcohol doesn't appeal to us anymore. That's what I needed to do
Yes.
to
Yeah.
change the perspective of alcohol so we no longer desire it, just like I don't desire other hard drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are all kinds of things that I help people with. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. I love it.
Yeah, that's powerful. It gets back to like that 180 mission, which I love it's 180 days plus the whole, yeah, like you say, the 180. What else do you have to do in your life that you can do? You can make that pivot, that mindset shift, right? So I love that. And I love, again, the distinction of, are you going to be, to me, it's like, are you going to be a dry drunk and be just like so worried about not being able to drink? Or even my energy is shifting, even just saying this to you. Or are you going to focus on all the different things that you get because you don't have to worry about drinking anymore, right?
Yeah.
My gosh, it's just like, it's such a freeing feeling. And dude, it takes a while to get there. So if you're the guy that can like point that out and help illustrate that, and I think a lot of people, when they're finding out something about themselves, it's easy for them to know what they don't want. And again, that's that statement of negation. That's what you're going to start thinking of. So if you're there to help guide them, okay, well, what do you want? Right. And
Mhm.
as you mentioned about yourself, I love the quote, I wrote it down: a life that you know that you're meant for. Like, to me, dude, that's it there. That's the answer. Right. And, or, a big part of it, if nothing else, right? The mechanics of getting the beer out of your hand. Okay. That's a big part of it too. Let's face
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
yeah, dude, like focusing on that. And yeah, I love it, dude. I just love hearing about it. I can see that you're lighting up talking about it. So yeah, great stuff, man. It's a really cool story. I love how you've taken, what was an unfulfilling, kind of dark spot that you were in, and so quickly and resiliently pivoted into something that not only is helping yourself, but so many other people. I imagine there's a degree of a whole other level of accountability that's on you, because now you are sober coach Chris, right? You can't,
Yeah.
there's no going back now, right?
No, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to. It's
Right.
the hardest thing about my job is when I have a call with somebody who's thinking about, working with me, and I hear what kind of position they're in. And some of these people are really, really in a bad spot. And I know that they could change their life, but they don't believe it,
Mm.
and they don't believe it
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us, and I used to do this too, living in fear of I don't know, I can't imagine life without alcohol. Like, we have it so much on a pedestal, and it's can be terrifying to imagine a life without having that there, and that keeps people from making that change. And so that is the most difficult thing for me. But yeah, it's, you talk about focusing on what you're going to gain rather than what you're going to give up, and that is such a huge important factor if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to quit drinking, because alcohol does have if you're currently a drinker, it's got a good place in your heart right now. So we have to put enough things on the other side of that teeter-totter to get
Yeah.
it to counterbalance and go, what am I going to get? How am I going to feel when I wake up with energy in the morning, when I get, clear-headed? I'm not, no more brain fog. God, I hated the brain fog.
Mm-hmm.
When this anxiety goes away,
Mm-hmm.
when I can start that business that I've been putting off, when I can have better relationships. Like, you start focusing on all these wonderful things that your life can
Mm.
be, and it helps, to keep the
Yeah.
focus there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, you know what? I want to be respectful here for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Chris. So great conversation. I could see where this, that we have like your origin story, we could easily, have you back on and we just pick a topic, you know what I mean? And just riff on that. So I could definitely see that happening in the future. I really appreciate you coming on. Like I say, yeah, I guess just for folks that are listening and maybe they are in that situation where they're like, I'm not quite sure. They're fluctuating. They're like, is this for me? What could you say to somebody that's perhaps a little sober curious right now that could be listening to this?
Well, I would say to give yourself a clean break from it, and I used to say 30 days, but I really think 90 days is a good chunk to really get in to see the benefits. If you can do 90 days without alcohol, and if you do the work on yourself in the meantime, like we do in our program, like, why am I drinking? What have I been avoiding? What is that thread I'm too afraid to pull at? Let's actually pull at it and take care of these things and build up our life so that we don't feel like we need anything to escape from or run or numb,
Mm,
run from or numb.
mhm.
If you do that work in those 90 days, there's a good chance that you won't want to go back. And so just start. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Jump into this thing with both feet and your head and your whole body. Don't kind of dip your toe in and have one toe in still drinking, because that
Mm,
will not work for the long haul.
mm,
You got to go balls to the wall, committed to this. Like if you were getting into a new relationship, your focus, man, 100% focus is on making sure that that relationship works. If you're applying for your dream job, you don't kind of half-ass it. You go, all right, what am I going to do? What do I have to do to get this job? Like, go into it with that kind of mentality,
yeah.
and you will have a much higher success rate. The other thing I want to say is don't give a shit about what other people think.
Mm,
Don't worry about what am I going to tell people if they ask why I'm not drinking. Who cares? We worry
mm.
so much about what other people are going to think and how it's going to affect them. This is your journey, and you'll realize everybody has their own crap that they have that they're worrying about. People aren't concerned as much as we think they are about our journey. Make it about you. You are the number one priority, no matter what, throughout this process.
Yeah, great advice. I love that. Yeah, Chris, if somebody wants to reach out to you, where can we be found where can you be found online? And yeah, what's the easiest way to reach out to you? What's your most frequented social media?
Yeah, so at Sober Coach Chris is the handle. That's Chris with a CH. Again, I'm most active on TikTok, so you'll find me in a ton of videos on there. I'm on Instagram as well at Sober Coach Chris. You can find me again. Join my Facebook group. That is called Freedom from Alcohol. And if you search that, you'll find that. You can also just find all of this at my website, which is sobercoachchris.com. And I want to say something about that. I'm not even a fan of the word sober. I don't really like labels when
Hmm,
it comes to this. I
sure.
don't like having to say I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I don't like the words that kind of are associated with it. And again, this is not to knock people that use these words, just for me, like recovery, relapse, sobriety, because sobriety can brings up this image a lot of the time of dull, of like,
Mm,
that's not what it is at all. But I keep my name that so that people understand what I do and how to find me.
hmm.
But you don't have to say I'm sober. You can say I'm alcohol free. I'm just a non-drinker. I just really wanted to stress that point. Like the labels, I think that's what keeps people from doing this sometimes. Like, well, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to have to say I'm an alcoholic and go to meetings and say that. I have a problem with alcohol and I want to overcome it. And so the
Mm.
label thing doesn't work for me. And so I want people to kind of understand that about my approach.
I really like that. Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. Perhaps we're setting the table for the next one. This is one of the topics that we get into because I completely agree with you. There's a lot of terms that can become limiting when you're talking about, yeah, you say like alcoholic or in recovery and such. And and then like you say, it's dependent from person to person, but I like your that's a refreshing stance on it. Nice and easy to find you though. Sober Coach Chris,
Yep.
that's .com, that's your TikTok, that's your Instagram. Shout out. I love the community. I'm a part of it. The Freedom from Alcohol Facebook group. Yeah, very much highly recommended on my end. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. This has been great. A wonderful conversation. I could probably sit here and talk to you for like 3 hours straight about this stuff, man. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.